Welcome to the DAV Podcast. The Vietnam War ended 50 years ago, and while it's often remembered through the lens of combat troops, the vital contributions of women who served are frequently untold. Of the brave Americans deployed to Southeast Asia, approximately 90% of the women were nurses in the Army, Navy, and Air Force Nurse Corps. In this episode, DAV's Elizabeth DePompei sits down with three extraordinary Vietnam veterans, Donna Koff, Linda Schwartz, and Diane Carlson Evans. Through their powerful first-hand accounts, we'll hear about the realities of life for women who answered their call to serve in Vietnam. Prepare to hear their stories of resilience, dedication, and the unique challenges they face in a conflict that forever shaped a generation.
Donna, when and why did you decide to enlist in the Army?
My girlfriend and I went to many of us. There were 20 of us in the class at the Rochester State Hospital School of Nursing. It was a 3-year course, and I was with one of the gals. We were good friends in school. I was at her apartment one evening after we both had put in about a year's employment as a nurse after graduation. And she was going through a nursing magazine, and there was a picture of an Army nurse join the Army and see the world. Now, at that time, it was Cold War, but we weren't in war. So it was kind of, let's do this adventure. So I made arrangements with the recruiter, and I told her, I said, our appointment's made, a recruiter, and she looked at me and said, I was only kidding. I said, Sandy. Now I went through all this. You're only telling me now. I said, we got to go through with it. She wasn't engaged yet, and I had broken my engagement. So we went into the Army together.
Linda, when did you decide to join the Air Force?
I was looking at being a nurse, and there was this article in Reader's Digest about flight nursing in the Air Force during the Vietnam War, early days. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I did.
Diane, what influenced your decision to pursue military service?
In 1965, my brother was drafted into the Army. I'm in nursing school. My other brother was in the 101st Airborne. I've got two brothers in the Army. During nursing school in Minneapolis, I would watch the 6 o'clock news and see what was happening in Vietnam. So that was 65 and 66. And in 66, things were starting to escalate, and now more of my buddies were not getting deferments. They were getting drafted. And then my 4-H buddy was killed in Vietnam. At the old age of 20, I went downtown Minneapolis and found a recruiter and said, I'm in nursing school and I'm going to graduate in a year and I want to go to Vietnam as a nurse. I'll join the Army Nurse Corps if you'll send me to Vietnam. And she said, well, there's no guarantees in the Army, but they are short of nurses. So the rest of that story is I graduated. I went to basic training in the fall of 67. And in July of 68, I left for Vietnam and arrived on August 1st in 68.
Donna, you had already been exposed to veterans and military service. It wasn't new to you, but what was it that called you to serve?
It was watching the news at night. I mean, you see what's going on, and I mean, they were filming in Vietnam. And I am from a small town in Ohio where 13 people that I went to school with, and my sisters were KIA.
Donna, when you realized, okay, this is happening, I'm going to Vietnam, what was going through your mind at the time?
Well, at Fort Ord, California, one nurse shot her foot accidentally. But we nurses don't have guns, so that doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And people were trying to find a way of getting out. The girls that I went over with, a lot of them were in college and getting their last year paid for, and they were married. And there were a lot of girls trying to get pregnant because you're not sent to Vietnam if you're pregnant. But I figured I signed on the dotted line. And if I wasn't going to be going on to Germany, I was going on. In war, well, I've read a lot about war. I know there's death, dying. I wasn't going to, I was going to be in a hospital, right? Red Cross over it, should be safe. Red Cross on our helicopters, ambulances, we should be safe, which wasn't true. But at that time, I thought it was.
Linda, you were stationed in Japan where Vietnam wounded would come and stabilize. What stood out to you most when you first arrived?
Many people joined the military to take care of casualties. That's what everybody thought you would be doing. But this was it. Because we were a casualty staging area, and we would get casualties coming right out of Vietnam. It was really a challenge because at that time, 60% of the nurses, this was their very first job in Vietnam. This was their first job.
Diane, can you tell me some of the things you remember?
The country, didn't have sanitation, and there was a stench. When I went to Vung Tau, that was on the South China Sea, and there was the fish, the stench of just a combination. But then there was the diesel fuel. And then inside the hospital unit itself, there was the stench of infections. Pseudomonas was common in Vietnam, and that has a terrible smell. So I remember those smells, and they'll take me back.
You wanted to serve as a nurse. Did you have a moment where you thought, what did I do? Or this isn't what I thought I was signing up for?
It's exactly what I thought I was signing up for. I worked at the VA in Minneapolis, the old VA. It was probably about 66 when I did this. For 3 months, my patients were World War I veterans, World War II veterans, and Vietnam veterans, and Korea. And I loved it. I loved those patients. I loved talking to them. I loved listening to them. And I just knew that this is what I wanted to do.
Donna, what was it like when you first arrived in country?
They sent troops, and our hospital went over by merchant marine ship, Buccaneer, a 2-week cruise. Very nice. You have your own room. You share it with another nurse. The guys, though, the enlisted were below, and they had it difficult because they had beds that were hammocks, and they were very sick. And we got over to Vietnam. There were about 6 ships in harbor. And when we got off, the guys got off with their gun, their rifle, and their steel helmet on. We nurses got off in our baseball caps. And then we loaded up in trucks, which are covered with canvas. And then when we got to the place where our hospital was, it wasn't built. All it was a flat piece of land, and the guys put up tents for us. So our tent floors were mud. And when the monsoons came, the tents had holes, and we used our hats, our metal hats, to catch water. We took our trunk, because you're down to a cot and a trunk with all your belongings in, mostly a lot of Tampax. And we put that on top of our cots so they wouldn't get wet. And we ate sea rations. And no one told us to warm our sea rations, even if a truck was around on the truck. We would eat our sea rations cold. I couldn't eat them. Do you ever have chicken when the chicken broth gels? I couldn't eat it. I lived on cookies and fruit. And meanwhile, until our hospital was built, they sent us to another hospital, maybe 6 of us at a time, because it was a MASH hospital. Now, my hospital was an evac. MASH hospitals are on the front line. Evac hospitals are to the back. But in Vietnam, we didn't have a front line. And one of the units that came from the field, and this is before our hospital was built, and our head nurse came in and she said, there is a unit back from the field and they'd like to invite nurses over for a steak dinner. Sounds good, better than sea rations. So probably a dozen of us went, and one of the guys was showing me around into his private area. We got to his desk and I saw a necklace of fresh ears cut off. That was the last dinner I went to. It's bad enough dealing with the guys who were injured, dying.
Linda, what were the days at your hospital like?
It was, we were getting people, casualties. We could get them within 6 to 8 hours after they'd been hit on the battlefield. Mm. And a lot of stuff we didn't even have, kidney machines or any of that stuff. And also you had to help the young casualties to deal with what they were now. And some of them, it just graduated high school and now they were blind. some of them just wanted to give up. They were supposed to get married and now they didn't have a leg. One thing, and I will tell you, is that we had something called Hamburger Hill. It was a big battle, and it was a real emergency situation in our hospital. We could take over 300 patients. We had 141s landing and offloading, so much so that the triage was actually our mess hall, and the docs were down there, and then it was just like a casualty situation. And I remember this one guy, he would not let go of his buddy. He said, "Tell me he's going to be all right." I said, "I have to see what's going on." He says, "He's going to be all right, isn't he?" That's the night that changed my life forever. Because seeing them helping each other in as bad shape they were, take care of my buddy first. I think we got over 400 casualties because it spilled over into another. The Army hospitals were very close to us. But that's it. That's the night that changed my life forever. I said I could never go back to civilian nursing after being with these people. These people are people. I guess I met her because I'm still doing it.
Diane, is there a particular day, patient, or story that stands out to you most when you think about your time in Vietnam?
So this one night, I was in Pleiku at the 71st Evacuation Hospital, which is a 400-bed evacuation hospital, and the beds were always full. And my unit, which was a preoperative and postoperative unit, we weren't warned of this in basic training, but when we got to Vietnam, us nurses realized we were caring for children and women mixed in with the GIs. And that was rough for the GIs because they were right next. That person we were caring for might have been the enemy. We didn't know who the enemy was, but we had a little Montagnard girl. I was in the jungle. Pleiku is in the jungle, and it's in Montagnard territory. The Montagnards are an indigenous mountain people who are not Vietnamese, and they have different, their appearance is different, their lifestyle is different. The first time one of them came in to see his wife, who was injured and in my care, he was wearing a loincloth, and he had a crossbow. I'd never seen a crossbow before.
Donna, tell us about your first day in Vietnam.
My first day, I was a day nurse assigned to orthopedic ward, and I walked into the ward in the morning, and there is 18 beds per wing, 9 on each side. So the 9 patients all had body casts on. Body casts from their waist down to their feet, covered. They have shrapnel wounds. I didn't get to see what a shrapnel wound looked like, but I saw the drainage through the cast within hours, and they were just out of surgery. They were our surgicals from the night. And we had later, it was a few months after I just got used to seeing the cast, but we had a guy who was casted with an arm to his side, and his cast was falling apart. It had to be changed. And 2 of the corpsmen, 2 of the OR techs came, took off his old cast, and all the tissue was gone. His shoulder, I could see the backbone. And he held his arm because it was broken. And they casted him up. And he never said anything. He never said, "Ouch, that hurts," or "Don't do that." Or, he sat there quietly while they did that.
Diane, can you tell us about some of the challenges that you dealt with as a woman in Vietnam? Was it something that was in your face? Was it not something you really thought about while you were over there? Just what was that like for you?
I can't speak for all women, but I would say most women in the military, past and present and current, have experienced unwanted sexual advances, maybe sexual assault. And women in general, being in the military, we are surrounded by men. When I was in the military, I was less than 1% of the military force. So we're surrounded by men, and when you're in a war zone, there's a lot of testosterone around you. And war does things to some men, not all, certainly not all, because there were plenty of decent, good men that I worked with and dealt with and my patients, but there's those predators. We learn to watch our backs, be careful. True confessions, I didn't even know that we could get birth control when I was in Vietnam. I didn't need to because I knew what it took to get pregnant, and that wasn't happened to me when I was in Vietnam because I wanted to stay. I didn't want to have to be sent home because pregnant women had to be relieved of their duties. We weren't allowed to stay in the 60s. When I was in Vietnam in 68 and 69, the U.S. military allowed abortions in military hospitals. I was shocked when I found that out. Well, I knew what was happening in our hospital, and I knew the women who were raped. Us women, we kept secrets. We didn't tell anybody. That was the way we could survive, was keeping the secrets for each other, because there was no place for us to go. There was no place up the flagpole, senior command. If we went to report it, we feared that we would be accused it was our fault. You shouldn't have been at that party. You shouldn't have been drinking alcohol. There was too many questions, but no justice.
Donna, what kind of community or camaraderie did you have with other nurses while you were over there?
We did things together. We did it for each other. So we were in a quad set with no walls, no curtains. You could look down and see all 18 of you, but we were in bunk beds also. We got dressers that gave us some privacy, but it was still open and you could see who was home and we ate together. So one gal says we're not supposed to hitchhike in helicopters, but we did. And she said, hey, I've got friends that'll take us to Vung Tau. So 4 of us were off for the weekend, our 3-day weekend. And she asked me, do you want to come down? I said, sure. And when I got down there, it was rendezvous with other men. Before I knew it, one guy had my dress unzipped. I looked at him and said, no. I was by myself for the rest of the weekend. It made me angry because she never said anything. If you were going to, team me up with somebody, you should have told me.
What was it like when you came back to America, Diane?
I came home in August of 1969 at the height of the war protests and at the height of the anti-soldier movement. Anti-war was fine with me. I was glad they were protesting the war. Maybe they could get it to stop. And so when I came home, I was very aware and I felt them. I felt the protests. I felt the anger. I was humiliated. I never felt ashamed of my service, but they sure tried to shame us into thinking we did something wrong. One war protester, one hippie said to me, he just got in my face and he said, you're no better than the baby killers because you were over there oiling the war machine. I had to wrap my head around that, and I thought, what did he just say? I've been oiling the war machine, which means, of course, that I was saving the lives of soldiers so they could go back and kill more people. And he blamed me for it. Was so nasty. And it was just so demoralizing. So I shut down and didn't talk.
Donna, what do you remember about coming home?
I know when we came home, we couldn't wear our uniforms. So I was probably the first ones to come home. And I was told, don't wear your uniform. My girlfriend was spit on her uniform.
So what was that like, transitioning, going from war in Vietnam back to a country where people are literally spitting on Vietnam veterans? What was that like for you?
I stayed away from everybody. I isolated, and I had nightmares. Bothered my mother with anything. I mean, I once told my mom in a letter that we had our food stolen. She was so upset. I didn't tell her about any other bad things. So, and coming back, I didn't share, and my parents, my family didn't ask. I just never could break through the ice in my own self. I could just never break open that box.
After all of these years, have you been able to feel proud about your service and what you did?
I hid it for so many years.
Sure.
It didn't make me proud that everyone wasn't supporting us.
Diane, you won a decade-long crusade to create a memorial in Washington, D.C. dedicated to the women of Vietnam. When you stand in front of that memorial, how does it make you feel?
I love talking about that. How does it feel to look out now and see the women veterans coming here and the male veterans and the sense of community and the crying and then the laughing and then the hugging? And I feel pure joy. I just feel pure joy that all that work resulted in the culmination of such a beautiful memorial that brings people together for healing, and that these women finally feel that they've been recognized for their contribution. And it's just this joyful feeling that finally, after years of hard work, it was worth every hour. But I used to think, if I did what I did in Vietnam, I can do this.
Thank you, Donna, Linda, and Diane, for bravely sharing these deeply personal and powerful experiences with us today. These stories offer a crucial perspective on the Vietnam War, highlighting the extraordinary courage and unwavering dedication of the women who served. The resilience in the face of both the challenges of wartime and the difficult homecoming they experienced is truly inspiring. Diane's tireless work in establishing the Vietnam Women's Memorial in Washington, D.C. stands as a testament to the enduring legacy of these women and a vital step towards ensuring their contributions are never forgotten. As Diane poignantly shared, that memorial now serves as a place of healing and recognition for all those who served. We hope this episode of the DAV Podcast has shed light on the often untold stories of women in Vietnam and honored their remarkable service. You can read Elizabeth's full story on Donna, Linda, and Diane in the May-June issue of DAV magazine. And if you'd like to learn more about DAV and the support we provide to all veterans, please visit DAV.org and join us next time for another important conversation.